What's up, guys? Lacey and Jennifer here with the Internal Astronaut, and today we are talking about a 55.2. And so what is it about this gate? This is something that has been said to be the spiritual key to the age. And the reasoning behind that is because this was the location that Chiron was discovered in. The line itself is called distrust. It's also interesting because this 55th gate, it has big implications for the shift, emotional awareness, where we're all going, and it's going to be a major sleeping phoenix theme. So the 55.6 being selfish in your material affairs, your material abundance, the way that you're making money, getting energy, earning resources. But at the same time, in that kind of individual trip, you're still somewhat beneficial for others, possibly. The other end is it becoming a mean spirit that will not share. So with this gate, having such big impact right now, we wanted to talk about this spiritual key to the age. And maybe we'll just start by reading the actual definition of this. So the line is called distrust. And it says abundance hampered by slander or gossip. And you have Venus exalted, the gift of being able to penetrate to the center that may demonstrate effectively through its relating talents that its trustfulness is genuine. Emotional stability and the strength of spirit is dependent on being trusted by others. The other side is the direct challenge to the slanderers, who will always have the advantage of quoting the bard, methinks he doth protest too much. Only continued example can overcome distrust. The emotional drive to insist on trustworthiness that does not guarantee its acceptance by others or benefits the spirit. And so I think all of that is so much. And what this basically is an emotional gate. It is the emotional wave, the individual wave. It has the highest ups and the lowest lows. So this can be a very intense in the pulse type of gate where you're up, you're down, you're spiking in different directions. And it's really all about mood. So not doing things that you're not in the mood to do, not seeing the people you're not in the mood to see, not going to that, opportunity or job or workplace if you're not in the mood to go. And so it's a very individual energy. And I think that is part of why it is so hard to navigate this, because where we are in time, we are so collective. We all have our rituals of being at this place at this time, doing this at this time. And with this energy coming into play, it's going to make people feel like, I don't want to go to that job today. I don't want to do that today. I don't want to be with this person anymore. And it's going to start to take on this different feeling where it's not so much about, I'm going to sacrifice myself and we're going to be here together and compromise and all this, but it's more so about, I've got the spirit and this is how it feels for me. And this is what is true for me. And if it's not true for you, that's okay. But it is true for me.
Transitioning, I think, just having the understanding that this is part of that emotional wave. This is the individual wave, the more extreme of the wave, the highest of highs, lowest of lows. And then, to be able to watch that and witness that. And as someone with fully open emotions, how that affects us and about the emotional people out in the world, how they're starting to build awareness of their ability to change a room or shift a human based upon the wave that they're putting out. And so I think we're seeing a lot of things in regards to people who are fully open emotionally, because that's who I am. And then, you with one of your children having those fully open emotions. And then also having emotional people in our lives and watching the full spectrum of what is coming about because of this 55.2.
Yes. And I do think it has such a different impact depending on your own emotional definition. Like me, for example, I actually have one emotional gate, and it is 55.2, and it's my unconscious moon. So I feel like, you know, this would be the only theme I have to grab onto and to see and to witness and experience. And it's interesting because Jennifer, even with her completely open emotions, her sun has 55.2. So I really wonder if this energy in and of itself is what has brought us to our inner authority, if this is, you know, what has us here sharing about this before, you know, so many people are even understanding what we're talking about or ready to hear it. And I do think that that impact, you know, if you want to start with completely open emotions, if you have built certain mental constructs inside those completely open emotions, you know, it's like the wave goes into these completely opens, and we don't know what happens with it in there. We don't know what they do with it. We don't have a specific theme that we can look and recognize it with. And so it's like, if it goes in there and that center is just full of mental constructs built to avoid confrontation and truth, then this energy is going to come in, and the completely opens are going to be shorting out. They're going to be doing all of their mental constructs on a very amplified level. They're going to see themselves playing out these patterns and maybe doing things like defending abusive people, you know, or putting down different people who are in the right, or, you know, just like hurting themselves and others and not allowing their own emotions or their own truths. And so how does that feel for you as being a completely open emotional person?
I'm seeing it in myself, and I'm also seeing it in others. Reading the 55th gene key has been so enlightening for me, because I have been experiencing a lot of the physical stuff that we're talking about in this mutation. Knowing the people that I have around me who are fully open emotionally, and also seeing how it's coming out in them. And I'm experiencing lots of odd things where it makes me know that my body's like, we gotta get rid of all this stuff you've been storing in here for 45 years. Like, this stuff has got to move. It can't stay in here because it's causing this or this or this. And it's like, it's finally purging from my system, but in ways that before my mind always wanted to make stories about, or make meaning to. And now I'm in full, mode of, my body needs to physically do this, letting that mutation be there on this level and experiencing the pain and the physical stuff that's occurring. It's like on a whole nother level of understanding for me. It's going to start become more and more aware to some, not to all. So collectively, that's something we also have to have an understanding of. So when we're talking about these things, maybe some people won't connect at all, or maybe you connect a little bit, or maybe things you've just been starting to awaken to some of the feelings of this. Living that experiment and not trying to live in the stories of it is what has allowed me to be able to witness it at this level. You're being able to witness like the same sort of things, right?
The point that I'm at is that I am so underneath these words, you know, like there's a whole world underneath the words that you use to describe emotions to yourself, right? So like, feel big feeling, mind tells you why. And it does that in order to feel secure. But here's the thing, your mind could give you a billion reasons and not know which one is true. Okay. So it's like, if we grab onto reason, it is literally for security and not necessarily because it's true. And that in and of itself can distort our seeing, you know, moving forward. And with the theme being distrust, I think that you and I have both gained a multitude of experiences to bring us to the place where we so no longer believe the words of the stories, of the ways we try to describe feelings to ourselves. You know, it's like, how does someone get to the point where they distrust every mind. They distrust their own mind. As you get to the point where you can allow the full spectrum of emotions in yourself, you can allow that spectrum in another, and so much of that is underneath the word. So let's go into like a real life story that Richard Rudd actually talks about in Gene Keys with this whole subject. Okay. We have so many people across the world that just militantly fight food choices and processed food and the things in processed food and the obesity happening in the world. And then you open up Gene Keys and you read 55, and it talks about what we're doing now, the way we're letting go of all this density, all of these wrong reasons and false decisions and, choices we've made about ourselves and life and others. As we let go of all this, it's a physical process. Like our cells are letting go of the density. So we need salt. He makes it so purposeful. He's like, why do we have processed food everywhere? It's because we're purging from our physical bodies, and the salt enhances the process and the fat enhances the process. Meanwhile, we are blaming and shaming each other and using stories to make ourselves feel bad and to try to destroy this industry instead of accepting what is and possibly gaining deeper understanding about why it's here in the first place. So how does that feel for you?
Well, for me, it's like validation of what I'm experiencing, not letting the mind blame and shame. I do think people, and I can't say for people who have an emotional system or have the emotional wave, but for those of us who do not, we become easily overwhelmed, especially fully open emotional, I would say, because there's nothing for us to grab onto. And so when we get to the state of overwhelm, we can fall back into the mind stories very easily. And so even though I have full awareness and full ability to see, there are times that I am so overwhelmed and I don't take the time to allow my body to get rid of it and to stop accepting more, because I'm working a job, I'm working with people, I'm listening to stories. My body gets to a point where it reaches overwhelm. And then I'm not allowing myself to take the time I need to allow that to leave so that mind story situation doesn't take over. Yeah. And I'm still working on that. And I think it's important to mention for those people who have a fully open emotional system, because I think that we more easily can feel that overwhelm and then fall into the blame and the shame and the mind games and the traps and all the things that we've worked so hard, to not be in. And so I think, really learning that allowance of self in this process and not blaming and shaming for, okay, I ate at McDonald's today. Okay. I'm fat and I ate at McDonald's. Does that make me a bad person? No. So it's leaving that story behind and not letting these society stories be the reason, but that maybe there's a reason right now why I carry the extra weight, why. And instead, of listening to that societal norm and those stories and the shame and the blame and the guilt, how about it's just like, it is what it is. Right. And our mutation is where it is. And all of these things, like the extra fat that our system is holding and the extra salt, is because salt detoxifies, and the fat helps benefit the process because it needs the extra energy to pull the generations of karma, however you want to look at it, generational trauma out of those very cells. Right. So instead of putting the mind stories around it, what if we can allow us to be in this transition period and it just is? instead of creating a story around why I'm fat or why I'm eating too much salt or any of these things. We need to let go of that story because there's actually purpose for the things that are happening in our lives at this very moment. And
Right.
while it might not be impacting everyone, there are those of us who it is. We will have learned what we're going through in order to help others through this when they start their process. And then they'll be able to pass their wisdom on as this fully moves through people. We need to stop worrying about the damage we've done to the earth because our population will be dwindling because sex and procreation is going to be a different thing during this shift. And so if we can stop, not saying that, we should just like throw oil in the ocean, but that the ocean salinity is what will detoxify it. And so the earth will be able to heal through the water and the salt and the same things that our body is doing, instead of putting all of our energy into the fear that will no longer exist post mutation. How can we just get to a place of allowing what is and looking to the future of what will be?
Yes.
And that's uncertain, right? And that's part of the problem.
It is part of the problem. And I think, and especially for open emotions and completely open emotions, so many of the constructs built in there are built on the whole dynamic that happens. So it's like, okay, we have emotional defined person and they're going through a wave and they're confused about why they feel so low. And so instead of being like, oh, like I'm just in a low and it doesn't have to mean anything, like maybe I'll go paint a picture or like enjoy feeling this way or find some way to integrate this feeling into my life because it's real and it exists, instead of going there, we've always just thrown it. So we've been like, oh, you did it. You're the reason. You're not meeting my expectations. And so the open emotional people, they will start to internalize these stories and believe them about themselves in every situation. So when, for example, someone is at doctor and they're looking for some type of medication, doctor gives them medication and he's like, well, it's obvious to me that you're bipolar, da 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 da. Even with no proof or imaging or anything that could necessarily prove to this person that they are bipolar and that they need to take this medication, they will do the whole not believing this, I believe this, because they have become that construct. They're like, well, I'm always wrong. Like, of course he's going to be right and I'm not going to be right, and so much of the 55.2 is demanding. It's like, look, you have to start taking care of yourself because every single person is its own universe, and this universe literally cannot know about yours. Like, they can't know what you've been through, what's wrong with you, necessarily diagnose you or tell you who you're supposed to be, where you're supposed to go. And so we have to grow to the point inside that we are the person that does that for us. It's like chasing all of this fulfillment and money and all these things. And with all these bargains that we haven't necessarily had to be that one. So if it's about choosing sleep over the deadline, there's only one soul in your body and your soul can only choose one body. Choose your body and go to bed over deadline. Like, this is what we're going to have to do. And this is how we're going to have to change if we are going to continue on, because that is exactly what's breaking down. So how does that feel?
Well, I think we could go one more place before we move on. And I think that place is why we have seen so much advancement in medicine, but not in mental health, right? Because in science, let's say, or physics or those things, we have a hypothesis and we're working backwards to recreate the results. It doesn't work in psychiatry. It doesn't work in psychology because no two things are the same. Exactly. And somebody's experiences formulate who they are. Therefore, there is no systematic testing. And that's why so many people are diagnosed with this or with that, or there's all these mental health crises. And I think we can take a look at, how we've discussed the gate of crisis, being in Neptune for 3 years. We're going to be living with this thing. I think we have to just realize why there are differences, and that psychiatry is like trying to come out of the stories that it has created by telling people, oh, you have bipolar because you have a chemical imbalance. It's that distrust theme again, like the person saying to them,
trust that.
Prove it to me, show me how you came to that decision, or show me how I have narcissistic personality disorder, or how I have borderline personality disorder. If we start asking these questions, you will literally get the response, I'm supposed to ask you these questions, and if you answer in this way, you have it.
Right.
How is that a form of diagnosis? That's crazy. And that is why we also see more people who are women who have more of these severe mental health diagnoses, because again, as we've had another video previously, we've talked about, the suffocation of the divine feminine and the blame and shame that is put upon women about how you're supposed to show up, you're supposed to be able to raise the children and have a career job, work 60 hours a week, your children are supposed to be perfect and have all their needs met, and you're supposed to be able to maintain the house and cook every meal, and all of these unrealistic expectations and stories surrounding this. It's not possible. I cannot attain this. This is not a normal thing to ask of another. When we're able to finally get to that point and start calling it out is when we're going to start to be able to fully release these things or these mind stories that society has created for us was created for survival, right? Out of fear, out of the need to have an explanation for why something is the way it is. Just like we blame teachers for kids not getting the correct test scores, and teachers are screaming, they don't even have their basic needs met. How can you expect them to learn at this level? But yet they want the mothers, or at least one of the parents, well, we all know in today's world, it's both parents out working 40 to 60 hours a week away from the home. So when we can start to distrust all these structures that have been built up around us, we'll start to be able to see how there is no answer, and how the answer that they've been giving we should have been distrustful of a long time ago. But that is how we will move into this new energy.
It was so freaking great. Well, and you've brought up some things that I think are so worth just pausing at. For example, we don't even have to blame ourselves for what we've been, because if we have been conditioned to build global society, and the way that we get people to do that is by, okay, this is going to be great, manifestor leadership. So manifestor leader walks up to group and they're like, look, you guys are being lazy, and what you need to do is XYZ so that you can get paid, right? So this has always been leadership, and generators are like, oh yes, like let's do that. And so if our leadership has always been about someone telling you who you are and how you're being wrong and what you need to do, then that's what we are all looking for, and we have to put that down so that we can come into deeper leadership of choosing self and what I feel in here, instead of letting someone walk up and be like, look, you're lazy and you need to do XYZ. You have to decide that you're your own authority, and that you know what, my elbow hasn't been working right for 5 years. Like maybe I should not do XYZ anymore. And maybe I should find something that works for me and that works for my body, because like no one can pick up my grandkid but me, and you have to start to see that value in yourself so that you can choose yourself. And I think this is the possibility of guidance leadership by projectors, because once a sacral person is no longer offended by being asked questions, right? So he goes to work and starts doing XYZ, and projector walks up and they're like, are you sure that that's like fulfilling for you? They take offense to it. Instead of like letting their sacral answer so that they can see for themselves, they're like, well, who the hell asked you? You need to go on. And so it's like projectors are in this position where they're ready to step in and to be these people who are guiding and choosing that other. But until they get to the point where they're not looking to be told who they are and what to do, that simply cannot happen. And so this distrust, it has to amplify in a way that's like unimaginable for everyone to be able to choose themselves on that level. And I think that it looks so much like crisis. It looks so much like I just watched myself go into adrenal fatigue and almost kill myself. Like my children could have lost a mother because I was choosing to believe story, over what I was experiencing the entire time. So where does that take you to?
I mean, so many things came up in just that short little thing, right? Okay, that brings up, the 28 and playing into the 38. And then you're looking at the opposite side, the 55 into the 39, and how we were discussing, like the pendulum of that emotion and the splenic awareness of survival and how that's playing together. If we're distrusting, like where is that distrust within the spleen, right? The fears are leaving. And so that means to me that the fears are going to be more amplified during this time. We're seeing, like all the political unrest and the changing of currency and the bank failures and I mean, we could go down and down, right? I mean, of course, it's going to take time to mutate out. The children that are now, you can see that they have less fear. And so then that brings about the thought of how do we parent differently and looking at the education system and how that needs to profoundly change. It's going to be demands of the people distrusting powers that be, the outer authority, like the projectors. In order for them to be able to step in, people have to start to distrust for them to be able to ask. I mean, I'm one that sees such beauty in projectors because my son is one. And I just see the beauty of what they embody and the unique ability and energy that they bring to any situation. And now I'm to point you like point them out. You're like, oh, yeah, oh, yes. Yeah. And I can't wait for them to be able to share their beauty and be seen fully for what they're capable of. And that guidance will become so important for generators to be able to pursue the things they love instead of living in this utter frustration. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see work structures be so different. It's not going to be like, do this and hate every minute of your existence. It's not going to be that anymore because it's going to be a more free-flowing, creative experience, I think, when we can get here.
Yes. Well, and if we're going to start talking about that too, I think it's good to bring some of that in, because what is this really about? It's about trusting spirit. It's about trusting source and knowing that life takes care of you and being able to make the leap because you trust life and yourself to that degree. Like that is a beautiful thing to have. And if we are all going to get to have some degree of this, or maybe some type of adventure with this, or at least seeing it in another, like that can be very impactful on everything. And that can change the way that we think, the way that we work together, the type of systems that we have. The words are so easy to believe. So I guess we'll see how life walks each and every person through their own experiences in order for them to find their spirit, in order for them to find that thing that will allow them to flow with life, and find that thing that says, hey, every emotion is okay, and you can feel pain and others can feel pain, because that is so much of the problem. Why does someone want someone to tell them who they are and what to do? They can't allow their own self. And, it's like to be sitting on a couch and to start feeling sad. Nobody wants that. Nobody ever chooses that, but it happens to all of us. So it's like, there are people who are honest and who allow themselves to be at that place. And there are people who do not allow themselves to be at that place. The sad thing about that is that if you can't allow it in yourself, you can't allow it in your child. You can't allow it in your wife. You can't allow it in your mother. And so the intimacy and depth of your relationships, it stops there. And you really get to see that, oh, the amount of self-love I have is literally it's the amount of love that I have to love other people with. And so beautiful tragedy, it's got so much of both sides of the spectrum. And I think that where we've been has so many beautiful places, when we're going has so many beautiful places. And so if we can just kind of hold that and see that and kind of share our experiences through the things, so that people who are going through it can be with people who are going through it. I think that that's the only thing we have, because you can never get the majority to perceive the problem. It's always the shamans of the society and the sensitives and these types of people that are waving their arms. They're like, look, something is happening energetically. This is not working. We can see it everywhere. But if the majority cannot perceive that problem, it can never be addressed as real, and no solution can ever be created. And so this is why it ends in collapse every single time.
And I think that's where we need to let go of that fear that has deeply controlled our lives. And that leads us to a whole nother, level of things, right? We talked about money and what, fear driving us makes us maybe more materialistic, or that the fear of not being able to provide drives us to adrenal fatigue when we don't know how to trust, or in some cases, distrust the stuff we're hearing, right? And so if we can help others see that fear is just a fear of the need to survive, and that it is okay to be uncertain, that it can be okay, and the lessons that we can learn from allowing that fear instead of trying to chase the fear and live with it and be friends with it. Instead, let it be an awareness of that fear that no longer drives us to make decisions that are not in our best interest.
So much of that fear in and of itself is what is stopping people from feeling the emotions. It's what's stopping people from choosing their kids over that job that, it's like, if we're at a point in time where we are going to have to forcefully choose ourselves and our family, it's kind of time for people to start throwing up that red flag and stepping outside of the fear of survival and into something with more depth, into some higher truth that is bigger than you, so that you can make this transition. Because it literally looks like this. We can stay in this fear for survival, but that in and of itself is what could kill us. So we have to get that next level thing so that we can come out of the fear of survival, and life can take care of us and put us in the right places with the right people. And we can be aligned in the shift. We can have the people around us that we're supposed to have, and the abundance that's going to come, and all of these things. And so it's like manically trying to make this money is actually the thing that could be stopping you from making more money or doing it in a way that you love more or being with your kids more. It's like our fear is what stops us from the solution.
Living in the actual true abundance of our existence. How, like, through the generations, like where we are in different places, like the older generation, maybe around my age and above, that so many of this age group can't even see the shift. It's just like so far beyond what is available at this point. There are a few of us, hence I'm here. But then if you could kind of contextualize that, I think it's really like important to see the mind stories or the things that also other people are starting to potentially see about younger generations that are telling the story about who the younger generation is, but really they possess less of the fear. If you could go into that, I think that's extremely helpful for understanding.
Yes. So, and it's funny because Jennifer was actually, we were talking about this before, and she brought up the best example, which was basically an older person in her generation looking at someone who's younger and seeing them, take trips, and even if they're not the most financially stable person, to see them choose to live life and to take that experience over jumping through the hoops that you've been told are the only solution that leads to the only fulfilling life. And so it's cool because I love to read ancient texts, and so many of them talk about changing through the generations and how the things that happen to you in your life may not even be about you, but about your generation, and putting you in the right place for that. And so I really think that the genetic change, it does come through children. And, classic Moses story in the Bible, this baby looked so different that they put him in a little boat and sent him down the Nile to the Egyptians, who he looked more like. It's like they couldn't even accept it to that degree, where they were literally giving child to people who were more capable of raising them. And so I feel like we're at this place right now where the mutation and the changes and what's coming is being delivered through the children. And so we have to put emphasis there and see that the changes happen in this way and allow it, and even gain wisdom from it. Because if, Jennifer's generation didn't even have the motivation to look at life and be like, there's more than this, like I should be able to experience before I retire. And then it's like millennials are kind of like somewhere in the middle, where they're like doing the song and dance, and they're all in debt because they've all done what they've been told, and they're all trying to raise kids, but the system's not really supporting it. And so like millennials are just like, what the hell? Like the society that we were sold is not true, and no one hears them when they're saying this. They just get turned into snowflakes. And then you've got the Gen Zers who distrust everything and everyone. These kids are hopping on plane with $0 to go take experience far away because they trust life in their self, and they're not listening to any of this crap. Like they are flowing in this alignment with this thing, and they're living totally differently than people who were born even just 20 years ago.
Not meaning that one is right or wrong or better than or less than. It's just about our differences, and how freedom is coming to those who are children in our eyes, right? Even though they're adults, they're children. But they're willing to not show loyalty at a job, to work and then say, okay, I've made some money. Now I'm leaving. I'm going traveling for 6 months, and I'll get a job when I come back. And they don't believe that we need to do the things that my generation has done in order to see success, or to, in fact, I think they totally think that what we have done is sold our souls. And in a sense, it's very true. We will stay loyal to a company that has never been loyal to us. We will continue to stay because that's what you should do. But they're not providing the pensions and all the things in order to keep those people, to make them be loyal. We're just doing that out of generational things being passed down, those norms. And they're just like, no way, I'm not doing that. That has nothing to do with me. You guys go ahead and live with that. I choose not to do that for myself. And I mean, I'm almost jealous. So many are living a life that I would love to live.
And Ra in the human design system, he talks about this, the collapsing of the details, you know, like that's like the big signs that are pulling us into what's next. And it's like the details are collapsing. Okay. It's like story that's being sold to mom is different than story that's being sold to teacher, and they pit against each other and neither one is true. So as these stories collapse and we see how empty they were, and that the whole point was just to, you know, stay together and build global society and all this, as we realize that, I don't know what that's going to look like, you know, but it's like it was good and it's quickly becoming not good. And we just all have to put down old themes, pick up new themes, you know, do the whole like adaptation song and dance, I guess. And I think that looking back at that new generation that's coming in and being jealous of them is so much better than where we are now, which is just like not hearing them, not believing them, not caring about them at all, you know, calling them shitty people and believing that we know what they should be doing, like that could ever be true, you know. And so it's like to look at a younger generation and see good things and actually want to get involved and encourage them and to hear their ideas and to hear where they see that life is going, you know, like that is so much healthier than an entire Congress of 90-year-old men. Like it is just so insane what I think we are going through and how drastically every single thing is about to change.
I honestly think the younger generation of kids is so beautiful if we would allow them to live fully in their creative expression of life. Like I look at my son's generation and I look at the struggles and I look at the things that they're feeling the pressure to do based upon these norms, knowing they know it's not for them, but they feel stuck between. And if we could just allow them and we could just say, yeah, you don't have to accumulate $300,000 in school debt or 50,000 or whatever it happens to be, and we can allow you to fully embody that creativity and live your potential. And I think that's where education is going, is that we're going to stop like holding these boundaries around what genius looks like. The genius is truly in the ability to be creative.
Yes.
And so if we could start to live in that expression of where I think those, you know, 15 to 25-year-olds are right now, they are going to lead us into this. They are going to lead us back to that creative potential. And that's why I would agree with you that I think children and the upcoming children and those children's children, they are the ones that are going to continue this change. And, you know, we talked about the fact that, you know, maybe Ross saw things a little dark and maybe Richard saw things quite beautifully. And maybe, I know you say, I see it as a beautiful tragedy. Like, what if all of those things are true? What if all of it is true? Like, do we have to say that one person is right over the other? No.
Well, and here's the thing. Okay, it's like if distrust is here to walk us out of belief. And what is belief? Belief is you picking someone else's experience over your own, you know, picking what you've been told over what you have seen and experienced. And so if we are all walking out of belief, then there is no one to believe. You know, there is only your experience and what you perceive as happening. And if that's true, the value we place in people is totally changing. The values are going from, oh, I value you because you meet my expectations and you do XYZ, to I value you for your unique outer authority and who you are and the experiences you've been blessed with, and so it's like, as we continue moving, we're going to want lots of diverse possibilities and views, and that's going to be the value, so much of pitting the systems against each other, I think, is what we're moving out of. And I think that if you actually take the experiment, Richard Rudd, he took the experiment, he got involved in the system. And on the day that he gained outer authority that looked differently than Ra's, it was time for him to build his own thing and share his outer authority, because that's the point, and we want everyone to follow strategy and authority so that they can have that unique outer authority and embrace others' unique outer authority. So it's like anybody who's like pitting it against other things, they haven't made it to the unique outer authority yet. Like, that's really the way that I see it. There is no right and wrong.
And I completely agree with you. Of course, probably because that's the way I am living this as well, is that even though I still have struggles and I fall back into the stories and I can do all these things, it's like then being able to step outside of it and say, oh, well, I was a little too overwhelmed, and see the process. And then also being able to witness for others and allow the other to do all their things, tell all the stories, make me the bad guy. And then for them to turn around and look at themselves and be like, yeah, it was me. All along, it was me. And it's about also, taking that ownership on for you to look at your own shadows and stop projecting those shadows onto others, and take responsibility of healing those things within yourself and taking the journey yourself, instead of placing blame and shame and guilt onto others about what you are struggling with. Because it's not for them, it is for you. And until you can get to that place, there's no way to allow the other, because you're still living in the mind game of it's your fault.
It's just so good, because if we think about it in terms of holding that full spectrum of emotion, and making that a goal, making that something that is good to do, once we get there, we don't even have to call it shadows anymore. We can just let it be what it is. It's like, and once, if we boil it down to allowing, I can allow negative emotion, I can allow difference of opinion or outer authority, I can allow uniqueness, I can allow my experience to be different from your experience, that is fully allowing what is, and not making it a personal problem for you.
Other people allowing you. And that's where there is so much difficulty, because there are very few people in a place that they have the ability to allow you fully. And so if you cannot create the mind stories, if you're living this experiment and you're working with this experiment, not allowing that story to take precedence, that there's something wrong with you, that you're at fault, that you have some sickness, you have some ailment, you have some, whatever it happens to be. It's about taking ownership of the things that you can take ownership of. Stop projecting that. And then also fully allowing yourself to be treated in the way that you wish to be treated, and not making a story up about that. I'm demanding too much of other people. No, you're not. I should be allowed to be in this room too. And so while, allowing other people is super, super important, I think the trick will be to get to the place where we can fully allow ourselves.
If we were going to be like, what does it mean to allow yourself? It means that no one can tell you what you've experienced. No one can tell you what you're being, what you're doing, who you are, because they're not inside your body. You are the only one inside your body. So everything that you know about yourself, no one can take that away from you. Like, it's not possible for them to know where you're going or what you're supposed to be doing. It's not possible for another human being to know that about you. That is 55.2. And that is the protection, you know, that we have the possibility of moving forward with.
Fully allowing myself, and I keep running up against these things because I'm the bad guy. And sometimes it is hard to keep continually standing up for myself in those situations. But knowing that without other people being able to witness me allowing myself, like, that's how people start to see, oh, that's how that's done. Because it hasn't existed in spaces before. And so if we can start to allow ourselves and show that to others, then other people will be more able to allow themselves as well.
When you're having a conversation with someone, where we're going, the correct way to talk is about yourself. So when you said this, I felt this. And when this happened, this is how I felt. Right? Instead of being like, well, this is what you did, and this is what you did to me, and this is who you are, and I've seen it, you know, that is like literally becoming so not true faster than we can imagine. And that's how we communicate. So if we are moving to the other extreme of like, if you can't talk about your own experiences, then you're dissociated and there's nothing I can do about that, you know, like.
But then allowing that to be it, not creating a story about it, not saying that they're bad because they can't allow your experience. It is a sit back and wait, because once they have experienced it, the awareness is there.
Yeah.
It's planting the seed for the seed to grow and flourish, right? So right now, it's waiting for those seeds to start to burst into seedlings and start to grow by showing the example. If there are questions or comments or feedback, let's get the conversation started about how you can start to allow yourself and start to move through this and find some ease within some very turbulent, very difficult times.
I love that. So with that being said and done, we will be back soon with another video for you guys. We love you. Have a great night.